more and more money. Okay? The more, I mean, imagine this, and these are facts. They've come out with a law saying if you have a borehole, you pay taxes on the borehole. There's a borehole charge. I think we saw a specimen invoice that they sent out to a school in Magodo where they have a borehole, and they said they had to pay 6 million a year. The government doesn't supply them with water, and instead, when those guys actually make the effort to, get water for themselves, the government penalizes them for it. That's number one. Number two, land use charge. The Constitution is very clear as to who is in charge of land charges on privately owned residences and empty tenements. It's the local governments. It's clear. And as far as I know, the Constitution, with my basic knowledge of the law, the Constitution is the supreme law of any country. Now, if you create a law that somehow seeks to, if you go ahead and create a law that somehow seeks to overrule the Constitution, it's a mark of one of two things. It's either you are extremely desperate or you are extremely criminal. Okay? And they've created this law in Lagos State that says that, private residences should pay something they call land use charge. I challenged the Commissioner for Finance here on this channel a few months ago to explain why it is that private residences and empty tenements, contrary to the provisions of the 4th schedule of the Constitution, are being made to pay land use charge. And he said, the councils, the local government councils appointed the state government as their agent for that purpose. And I asked him to show us where in the Constitution the local government councils are empowered to delegate any of their responsibilities to anybody, because the Constitution is clear as far as the president and governors are concerned. They can actually delegate some of their responsibilities to people that they name. And the Constitution is silent on delegation as far as the local governments are concerned. So this illegality that goes on in Lagos is all geared towards, raising more and more money for the state governments whilst emasculating the local governments. And that's the reason the IGR keeps rising, because all the fees, charges, levies, rates that are supposed to go to the local government are going to the state government. The state government that's supposed to be giving 10% of the federal allocation that the local governments receive to them as additional subvention are not doing it. They're actually taking out of their federal allocation and pocketing it. So hence the impoverishment of Lagosians, because the closest section of government to them is ineffectual.
Can I come in here?
Completely.
We had some guests here when we're talking about voter education, as in political literacy, democratic literacy. And our guest from London said something. He said the politicians are to blame because they deliberately, they deliberately keep the electorate misinformed or disinformed or not informed at all.
I think what she meant was the politicians in power. I think that's what she meant.
No, what he said,
not all politicians. It's a blanket statement and it's unfair.
He said the politicians. Now, why would the politicians keep the people in the dark about their power?
Politicians in power who are desperate to hang on to power by all means possible will do everything they can to obfuscate the truth from the people. That is a fact, and that is what we've witnessed since 1999. Let me give you some examples. In 1999, a certain candidate, campaigned for votes in Lagos and pledged openly that he was going to build a coastal road, he was going to build a new airport in the Lekki corridor, he was going to expand the Lekki-Ekpe Expressway. 19 years later, none of those promises has been fulfilled. Instead, what they did was they expanded a small portion of the 85-kilometer Lekki-Ekpe Expressway. It's a 23-kilometer, it's an 85-kilometer road. They expanded just 23 kilometers of it, and that took them 12 years. Imagine, that road was built in 3 years. The original road was built in 3 years, 35 years ago, by the Jakonde administration. It took them 12 years to expand 23 kilometers of it, a small portion. And as soon as they got to kilometer 6, they started charging the people for the right to use the road. They started tolling it. Now, nobody has bothered to ask, why has the pledge to expand the Lekki-Ekpe Expressway not been fulfilled? Why has the pledge to build the coastal road not been fulfilled? Why is there no Lekki Airport? Why is there no legacy port?
They're building that already.
No, they're not.
That hasn't started.
They're not. They're not doing anything. They've put a signboard there. It's government by signboard. They put a signboard there, you know, and nothing. Just a whole lot of cleared land. And land speculators are going in there and doing all sorts of, you know, committing all sorts of havoc to the people of the state. No recourse. So the real question that we need to ask is, why is it that the people in power, I say it again, it's not all politicians, it's just the people in power. They take the people's resources, they manipulate the media, the sources of information that the people have, they manipulate everything. They take the NBC and say, oh, if channels talks about the president in an unfavorable way, sanction them. If this radio talks about the president in an unfavorable way, sanction them. If they dare to mention that the president's niece is on the INEC board, sanction them. If they dare to mention that, you know...
You're actually talking like a politician.
No, I'm not. I am not. These are facts.
With my knowledge
Excuse me, sir.
Okay.
With all due respect to you, and with all due respect to your opinion, to which you're entitled, you're perfectly entitled to it. The truth is, we are living in a tyranny. And that tyranny at the federal level has permeated down to the local level, such that you have a governor that doesn't listen to anybody. He doesn't listen to the civil servants. He doesn't even listen to his own constituency in his own party. Hence, the problems that they have. You know, members of his own party are saying, no, we don't want him back. Civil servants, who should be his primary constituency, because he himself was a civil servant for many years. He served Lagos State for many years before he was, before he resigned. Let me just say that, okay? Now, today, a man who was a civil servant has turned himself into an enemy of civil servants. So, what does that tell you? It says when people, when certain people get into office, they become so enamored of the trappings of power that they will do absolutely anything.
Okay,
to
all right, Mr. Badawasi. Thank you very much. Now let me swing back to Mr. Shomi. Mr. Shomi, do you think it's time for a change in Lagos State? I'll ask you point blank.
Yeah, I would comment on that, but we need to understand some issues.
You want to react to...
Yes, somehow, because otherwise we won't understand how government works worldwide. The fact of the matter is, Lagos State created some local governments, you know, LCDs, what they call LCDs, and those LCDs must be funded, not due to the fault of Lagos State, because they were legally created, but it became incoherent, according to the Supreme Court, simply because the National Assembly has not or did not, you know, ratify them. So because of that, they were not entitled to statutory allocations. So, and since they've been legally created, they have a right to exist. Lagos State now has a problem to fund them. So they obviously will look at other creative ways to harness the resources of local government, you know, to fund those LCD. There's nothing criminal about that. There's nothing wrong about that, because we live in a federation. If this is a federation, Lagos State should be able to create its own in line with what they want.
You mentioned the Supreme Court.
Yes.
Saying that the local governments will
be incoherent. The LCDs, yes, they have a right to create them. They are legal, but they will not, you know, be entitled to statutory allocation until they are ratified by the National Assembly.
But do you think,
through the amendment of the Constitution? Yeah.
Do you think in giving that judgment, the Supreme Court did not think about the residents of those local council areas?
They did. They did.
So do you think that the Supreme Court expected that the government, as the case may be, in whichever state here, would put pressure on the residents to fund those LCDs?
No, look, the problem is we live in a country where we are used to not paying tax. Who is supposed to fund government? Residents.
Please, let's
go. I'm coming. It's residents. When you look at...
Hold your thoughts, please. We need to take a break. We'll be right back.